Okay, this is basically the
Okay, let's see, do we still have people on the Hangout? Yes. We've got people on the Hangout. Hopefully everybody can still hear me. I started up a new live stream. Let's see, what were the questions? All right. Okay. It looks like Sean answered Keith's questions.
He just wasn't sure if you can add this topic and where if you should put it up today or
What's the?
well, we can pause there. It's
Okay.
not an immediate thing.
Okay. So, and you've taken over updating the PTG bond?
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. McGinnis. I can't be a totally one-man band. All right. Storyboard migration. Who's excited for this topic? Woo! Woo! Okay. So, our friends in Manila land are holding off until we have attachment support, as of yesterday. I'm trying to decide at what point I bite the bullet and say we're going. So I spent time talking to Julia, who moved over during the Rocky release. I think they went pretty early in the Rocky release, and kind of picked her brain on what she thought about it. So I first asked about attachment support, and she was like, I'm really glad they don't have it right now, because, well, so her input was that people would just hit a problem, grab their logs, throw it in the bug, throw it over the wall, not look at it. And so she would, now they're having to actually look and find the relevant part of the log and put it in the paste bin and put a little more thought into things.
I think for Cinder, people have usually been pretty good about that.
Well, and that was going to be my question for Cinder, is how important are attachments for us? Because I can't remember the last time I saw a bug with an attachment on it.
Yeah.
I have the same impression that every time that someone needs to post something relevant, people go and post in paste bin and put the links there.
Okay.
My perspective on it's different, but I'm wrong probably, but I'll just say it, which is that when people paste in, they often don't have what's relevant, and we have to go back and forth and figure out what the real problem is. So I like to say, give me your scheduler log.
Okay.
Give me your whatever, and I can back up to when the service started, whatever. I can help frame the problem for what it really is. So that's just where I'm coming from. I'm just explaining.
Yep.
I respect Julia and her perspective, and
then you run into the problem of getting a 10 megabyte, 20 megabyte log.
Yep.
Yep, this is my scheduler. Now go figure it out.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I can do that really quick. Usually.
Dan, you're smart.
No, I'm not. I'm not, because I can go back and look for the filters where it was filtering out the stuff, or I can see that the service didn't start up at all, or that the Cinder volume service isn't reporting to the scheduler.
Mm-hmm.
There are 3 or 4 or 5 things that I can check right away, and maybe if I were really smart, I would, in the initial things, say check these 3 or 4 or 5 things right away and communicate that to the user in a way that the user can check it themselves and get back to me and so on. But my experience is that doesn't work. So it's kind of like, what we call an SOS report.
Yeah.
Just give me the whole thing. Tell me where your explosion was, and I will now go look in the subway to see if there were wires sticking out with a bomb. I will check this. I will check this. So that's why. That's my perspective on it.
Maybe,
why I want attachments. I'm just explaining.
Yeah, maybe
I'm not saying you guys shouldn't go ahead and move without it.
The problem with Cinder sometimes is that some of the problems are on the connection side of things, and some of the problems may be really apart.
Right.
When the problem actually, the root cause and where you see the problem, sometimes are really far apart. So you may have to spend a lot of time going through those logs.
Right. So is the customer going to do that for you
Well, the problem too is if the,
If,
reliably?
if they
the-
want me to check it, they should.
if the relevant messages are also in a tarball or something, nobody can find them when they're searching to find duplicate bugs or
That's
true.
persisting bugs.
Go grabbing stuff.
That's true.
What if-
Okay, so you
but
guys
I
are gonna go
disagree
ahead
there.
and not wait on
Because-
attachments?
Yeah,
Well,
there was the
so-
other point that you mentioned about waiting them to fix some small things like attachments and then
Sure.
move after they do the implement, or at least they.
Yeah, I mean, my concern is if we don't insist on not regressing from Launchpad on this point
Oh.
now, that it may never get done.
Yeah.
So that's why I was partly, you know,
So,
it seemed like an important step backwards that's being taken. Unlike things, you know, like search sucks, okay? So that's a step backwards, but we know it's going to have to get better. I mean, they can't say, oh, we're just not gonna bother with that.
right,
Whereas initially they said Storyboard isn't for doing attachments. That's not what it's for.
Well,
I'm not
and-
gonna do that, which I
so-
understand because it's an application, you know, Swift or something like that, or S3 or whatever, something like that's a better way to do attachment. You know, it's not a web app, right? You know, but on the other hand, putting a portal on there that gives you a way to do it and building that into the design seemed like a reasonable thing to ask for. So I was concerned, you know, if we don't ask for it now, we'll never get it.
Yeah, well, how do you get security patches without attachments? People
Exactly.
just make
Oh,
comments, like,
that's a good one.
that sounds like,
That's the kind of stuff that people are reporting. Logs from security vulnerabilities, logs from CI stuff. I mean, it's not that they want to throw a bunch of logs at us. It's just that, I mean, following the request ID across multiple things is going to require you to look at multiple files. So even if they're giving you snippets of files, they're uploading them rather than putting them up on basement or something where you're.
I also don't think the way to get users more targeted is to prevent them from uploading an attachment.
what?
Maybe they'll be
Yeah,
lazy,
yeah.
but then you can say, hey, you're being lazy. Please, I asked you a specific question. I asked you to go
Yeah,
to here
I see
and
what-
look at this, and you didn't answer me. You just threw a log at me. I'm not condoning that.
I mean, the alternative here is to go put it up somewhere else and give me a link, but how do I trust that link because it's outside of Launchpad or Storyboard or something?
Well,
So if you're putting up images links or something, how do I know you're, I don't know.
I was kind of wondering that about, we've been using Pastebin. I don't know that we use it a lot, but is that paste.openstack.org or what?
Yeah, and it has a limit to the number of lines you're pasting.
Well, the big problem that I worry about with that stuff too, and I'm not sure how this has gone for cinder bugs, but I mean, if somebody pastes something there, you want to be able to go to that bug like 2 or 3 years later and still get it. Is that even possible?
Yes.
Always paste.
it is. Because that was one of the questions I asked with Julia, and she's like, I've got stuff in paste from 10 years ago.
On paste.openstack?
Well, that's kind of a requirement if we're going to encourage anybody to use it.
Yeah, sorry, it was.
So
8
a lot
years
of other
ago.
paste bins have time limits, you know, that expire and clean garbage plug. So if based out OpenStack's forever, that's good.
Well, and as long as it's actually like a supported service that they intend to maintain. And
Well, I think it'll always be a supported service, and right now it never goes away, but I don't think there's any commitment that they're not gonna decide they need space and they're gonna delete some of the old paste out of there.
Right. It just seems to me like, you know, a cheap Glacier type way to keep logs forever
Yeah.
might be a good thing for OpenStack Infra to have.
So,
And-
okay,
and-
so here was the discussion I had with them yesterday. I went in, guns blazing. And their answer was, well, okay, the reason that you originally got that's not what Storyboard is for, is because the database in Storyboard is not designed to hold a bunch of blobs
Sure.
of data. And we're like,
Sure.
okay. And they're very open to adding the ability to click on something and
Yeah.
upload a log that goes off to a Swift backend somewhere where it will be held.
Right, Doug and I talked that whole
Yeah,
thing through.
The
and
problem
it's
is that we have no storage to do it with.
And that's why I said in OpenStack, investing in some kind of cheap forever storage
Anybody know?
seems like a decision worth making. And so I'm kind of back to saying, I think it's an important enough issue that I'm inclined to apply the only lever I have on this one
Okay.
now.
Oh, yeah, and it's kind of-
And it's, you know, it's not a major investment. It's not money that the infra team has or the storyboard team has, I guess is what I'm thinking. If we're going to be open infrastructure going, you know, the open infrastructure project going forward, it seems like a reasonable thing
I
for
offered
OpenStack to have, you
I
know,
offered
the
to build
foundation to decide how to fund or whatever.
I offered to build a Ceph cluster in my basement, but we'll see what happens.
And your basement is forever, but
I hope so.
So as far as the storyboard, I don't know a whole lot about their project mission or anything, but I mean, do they actually have a goal of building a world-class bug tracker, or is being a bug tracker just like one of the 10 things that they're doing?
Well, I think the goal is to be our bug tracker and to be better than Launchpad was
Okay,
eventually.
so that's at least non-Mickey Mouse, even if it's not world-class.
right. But I mean,
Right.
things like, we should have some general idea of what the requirements are for a bug tracker. And it sounds like we're not too sure about the attachment thing, how strong of a requirement it is, but I'm sure we can decide one way or the other.
Right. So let me continue my thought process here. As I've tried to convince myself to do this, I mean, I don't like Launchpad. I don't even really know how to use Launchpad that well. I'll admit that. So I'm not married to it. I think that this ties in with, it's an opportunity for us to be more intentional about our processes and to think about them, because we're moving to a new bug tracker that affords us other opportunities to maybe make our lives easier. I mean, you know, the first thing is the fact that new bugs show up in the project at the top immediately, and it's easy to see things in chronological order, which in Launchpad we haven't been able to do. It's easy to automate the kind of things that I've been doing manually in our priority Etherpad, using tags, you know. So as we create stories and tasks for Stein, say, which it won't be Stein, it'll be whatever the T release is, we say, okay, we're going to put this tag on everything that we're targeting as a feature in Stein, and it'll come up in a nice list on our dashboard. Same thing with targeted bug reviews, as we're trying to do, you know, clean up bugs, is we could have go through and have, you know, old bug or something, and we'll get a list of bugs on our dashboard of ones that we should look at each week. There's more, and maybe we could do that in Launchpad, but I think it's an opportunity for us to think about this and to go forward with it. One of the so when I talked, one of the good things about the meeting I was in yesterday is the Octavia team, who's been on Storyboard for a while, was there, and apparently they've pushed a lot of the complaints forward to the team. And they, you know, they said search is significantly better than it was, and is continuing to improve. And they were pleased with the fact that issues were getting resolved more quickly by that team, and that they were being more intentional about fixing them. So I feel like when they say, hey, and one of the things then I asked about security, and we have the ability to template a private security bug. So basically we would have somewhere on our dashboard a click here to file a security bug. It would pop up a template that's pre-filled with the important information for a security bug. Now, the problem is they don't yet have a way to add in the appropriate email addresses. So as part of what it sounds like we need to do anyway, we should document how do you handle a security bug, and we'll put in there for in the meantime, put this list of email addresses as interested parties on it.
Well, we could probably get some openstack.org email alias or something that would work for that. But
Okay.
that's another thing I'm not sure about is the way that works in Launchpad is that there's a group that exists in Launchpad that people are a part of.
Yep.
So where does that end up living?
They are implementing a grouping function right now to address that.
Oh,
So yeah, that was the other question was, okay, grouping. And that is, so their list of priorities right now are, as I saw it when I was there, I wasn't there for the whole meeting, but it was grouping, getting security vulnerabilities set up so that you can do them, implementing attachments, and working to figure out where they get some storage for that, and continuing to improve the functionality of search. And then, dealing with all the other bugs that are coming in.
so what other requirements should we be coming up with?
So, well, here's my thought. And I said I was going to do this before we got here, and I didn't. I did a really good job of avoiding it. What I think, I think we need to tentatively go forward, assuming that at the end of Stein, we're going to switch over to using Storyboard. I think I need to start using our test one, which I don't know why I can't get to it right now. The Storyboard dev is not.
Well, I thought you were going to say you're going right now. You're much more on the same timeline as Manila than I was thinking then.
But I think there's
So I want to start prototyping it and building useful Kanban boards. And
that's exactly what I want to do. Is I want to put together a prototype that is documented and shows the processes that I think we should start using in the new environment. And with the goal of, at the end of this release, we move to using it at the beginning of the T release, so that when we are here, is that when we're back here in Denver? No. Yeah, the next PTG will be back here in Denver. We can then use the processes that we've defined over the last, 6 months to go forward into it for the T release.
we also didn't rule out migrating mid-cycle if attachments gets there, and if we can get, we build our boards that have the launch, the M1, M2, M3 targets and that type of stuff. It's not clear to me that it would be that hugely disruptive if we already have the main portal set up with, here's how you do the basic things we do today.
Yeah.
And then we can enhance it beyond there. Because honestly, we don't use Launchpad in any very fancy way today.
Well, so I wanted to actually think a little bit about the processes that we used to use or do use or should use as far as that too, because we actually used to use more Launchpad capabilities than we do now. And we used to actually keep track of bugs on like a per stable branch basis in there. And then at some point we just quit doing that, and I don't really know why, but it was actually pretty nice. And I'm wondering if that's the kind of stuff we should revisit with with this. I don't know if Storyboard even has any real knowledge around stable branches or not.
It will if we give it to them. Give it to it.
It
That's
has
the kind of
Garrett
stuff.
integration.
Yeah.
So we can
Well-
build, no, I mean, I think we have to build it, but at least
Well, our current Launchpad scheme has geared integration for branches too, but what we used to have was we would actually target bugs. And you could target a bug, well, you can still do it, it's just we quit for some reason that I don't know why. What we used to do is target a bug to a handful of stable releases, so we would know we were tracking it there and we're gonna fix it there.
Right.
And at some point, we kind of threw out all of those processes without really, I'm not sure it was really a conscious decision. They kind of just stopped happening at some point.
We never really documented what that process was.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
it was just
and
more of
ju-
a lack of knowledge, and then it eventually just stopped.
Yeah.
Well, and I'll take some of the responsibility for that I never took the time to dig into Launchpad and make the most of it. And that's why I kind of want to course correct here going into Storyboard. So what I could see happening there is, so when you create a new story bug, it by default creates a task for that, right? And the process we could set up is to create subtasks for the stable branches that needs to be put into. Because we used to use tags in Launchpad to say, hey, this needs to go back into
No,
stable. whatever.
before tags, we actually used the Launchpad branches,
Oh,
which
okay.
are still there and you can still do it. We
Yeah.
just don't.
Right. But we could, with that, you could create an additional task and say, okay, which actually this isn't all a bad idea. Create an additional task, tag what branch it needs to go into, and then we could even have a dashboard that shows what bugs are awaiting or what tasks are awaiting backport.
Have you thought through tag management? I have not, except to think that it's an Storyboard's driven by tags.
Yep.
And we saw at lunchtime, they said, well, it's really good practice to put your project's name at the beginning of the tag, because, so you're effectively kind of namespacing them to your project. But anybody can make any tags anytime they want. So it's kind of up to the project and the project's own workflows and so on, and figuring out the answers to exactly the kind of questions you're talking about, Eric, is to what tags we're going to use and how they're going to be, if they're just in Launchpad right now, we have official tags and unofficial tags and stuff.
Right.
And I go through every now and then, clean up, and just arbitrarily say, these are official tags. And
For
clean
Cinder-
them up
for
and
Cinder,
try
we
to
mostly
encourage
just
use of those.
Cinder, the tags have mostly just been to tag drivers.
Yeah, we tag drivers and we tag it's scheduler. Or
I think that's about all we tag. though,
Yeah.
currently.
But I think we're going to need to use tags more, and there's potential for them to be just a real jumble unless there's some guidance.
Right. Yeah, the fact that it all sounds very open-ended, free-form is kind of.
It is. It's
I-
a very low-level tool.
I have raised that, and their answer is, but this is the opportunity for you to create your processes.
And they point out
But it won't be a
rightly that
process
there
in
are
the-
projects that are cycle with milestone. There are projects that are, not at all, and their needs are really different. So this gives us an opportunity to customize something that's appropriate for our projects. But there are a heck of a lot of cycle with milestone projects. They're going to have kind of common needs that you would think could share best practices. If people are still going to target things to milestones, then everybody's going to have a Kanban board that with M1, M2, M3 and done or something, RC or whatever. And why reinvent that on every project? And they're projects that distinguish features and bugs and ones that may have no need to do that.
So you asked Eric, what are our requirements?
Yeah.
And I don't think any one of us can say that, what that is. I think what we can do is talk as a group about how we want to use this, and what we should do to use it. So how about this? So I'm gonna dig into so there are a couple different ways we can do this. We can find time on Friday if we have extra time to sit down and start brainstorming this. That's one idea. Another idea is I could write a spec for us to do collaborative design of, and I can go poke at Storyboard and figure out what we could and couldn't do potentially, and then try to write up a spec with a proposal of how I would like it to work for us. And then start implementing that once we have some agreement. Or I'm open to other ideas, but I would like to intentionally work forward during the release to be ready to cut over at some point during the release or at the end of the release.
Which sounds.
One of the things I wanted to do was look at people who've already moved and see what boards they've developed and steal, frankly, if they were good. So the Sahara folks offered to let us look at theirs.
Okay.
They're a relatively small scale project, but they have some smart people on it and we know them.
Okay.
So we can just share it. I'll if I see something interesting, I'll let you know.
If you see something, say something.
Yeah.
See, I went through the ironic board, and Julia was kind of honest that she's like, well, we cut over and didn't really plan it, and we're not fully using it. And I don't want to make that mistake.
Yes.
If we're going to go through the pain of making a change, let's make it a benefit.
Yeah, and like Eric says, kind of let's take it as an opportunity to revisit some of these processes and stuff and make them.
Yeah, I do think that, but I also am not sure if we're going to try to do it within the next cycle. I don't know that there's really a lot of room for Storyboard to add anything for us in that amount of time.
I'm not saying I'm saying I design it during Stein.
Okay.
And
We got to start sometime, right?
Yeah.
I have to start sometime with the goal that we feel comfortable making a change at the end of it.
Okay.
So at a minimum, we should have an agreed upon spec of how we want to leverage its capabilities and some documentation that supports how we're going to use it, so we don't cut over and have people go, well, what the hell do I do with this thing? Because I should be able to, after we move, if for instance, Wu Jay, being a new person coming in, says, well, how do I write this bug, or how do I find this list of bugs? We should be able to point to documentation that says, here's how we're using Storyboard.
It would be nice to have a nice bug template. O has that already in Launchpad.
Okay.
You go fill it out and they have a really good, and they also have a triage process that's described there.
Okay. Yeah, that would be good. That was one of the things that drove me nuts about Launchpad, was there was no way to really set up a template that says, here's the info you need. So that's another benefit. On the phone call. What was the other thing I wanted to say here? I think there are also using the lists it creates, we could have a more intentional triage process that would combine with our weekly, review of things with that. So I'm getting the feeling that you and I, Tom, aren't as far off in our view as I thought. You're planning on actually starting to put a process together.
Yeah, I
You're
want
just not
to
moving
have
tomorrow.
something so that when we do the cutover, we're at least as good as where we were in Launchpad. It doesn't have to be perfect, but and when I say at least as good, I don't mean that there aren't cosmetic, annoying things that we're gonna have to go through, but the fundamentals are there.
Okay.
So we target bugs to milestones. We do attachments, things like that. We can tag them, with meaningful tags. Like I said, we don't use all that much in Launchpad right now. Maybe we should use more, and then we could, as you guys say, it's an opportunity to actually do better.
Yeah.
So we can do that too.
So one thing we have a lot of for Cinder bugs in Launchpad is where you have one bug ID that is marked as affecting Cinder and OSBrick and Nova, and it's all in the same bug. How does that kind of thing happen here?
So you would have a story that says, here's the problem, and then you'd have subtasks that point at the different repositories.
Is it set up where somebody filing a bug is going to have any idea about that?
Again, that would be something that we need to document and educate people on.
I think it kind of works like Launchpad now, where you file the story and associate it with a specific project, but then you can add additional projects and you can remove ones if
Yes.
you realize it doesn't
Yes.
actually affect.
And the difference is, instead of it being additional projects, it's tasks associated with a repository. And then in Garrett, when you submit the bug or submit the patch, you would do story : task : and so it would make a note in the story that a patch associated with it to whatever branch happened, and it would close the task with that task number showing that it would move it to merged.
That's actually a little more structured than Launchpad.
Yeah.
The Launchpad is sometimes a little confusing to see what's fixed where, and for these bugs that span multiple projects. It hits Oslo, and it hits everybody who uses Oslo, or something like that.
And I was a little bummed actually with the demo they did yesterday. They didn't have enough time to really show what they wanted to show. It was a lot of jumping around, and I'm afraid it scared people a little bit more. I had to sit down with Julia and just have her for 45 minutes hold my hand and go, oh, you can do this, you can do that, you can do this. And it was like, oh, this makes sense to me now. So I'm not so scared. I just want us to do it intentionally. And I don't want to kill us with process, but I think it's also an opportunity to, because shit, where can I go get all this info on how to do it in Launchpad? Yeah, we never documented it, did we? So I really think it's an opportunity here. I won't blather on about it further at this point. Are we in agreement? Oh, so how do we want to work on defining some of these requirements and design? Do you like the spec idea? Do you want to do it through some other method? I'm open to proposals.
How many people are going to contribute to the spec thing if we do that?
Do we want to do it as a spec or as a patch or doc?
Oh,
Yeah, that's
Well, there's
not a
that.
bad idea.
skip the spec and just, I start documenting it as I'm playing with it, and then we write the documentation to support the processes.
It could be multiple patches and make incremental progress,
Mhm.
You get something, people agree that part's good. We don't have to wait till it's perfect,
And then I will try to, I would hope that I could then in Storyboard Dev, create examples of what we're trying to do so that, so in the patch, I could say, here's an example. You know what, I would do it probably in the Garrett review because we wouldn't want the example pointing off to Storyboard Dev in our documentation. But,
we can partner and try to do something on the vanilla side along in parallel.
Okay.
And and I like the idea of prototyping. It's a little more agile than waterfall, as it were. In other words, it's not a fixed product. We're getting it. We're getting it started. We're talking about the processes and improving them. And one of the things would be to have the weekly bug triage meeting. You would look at a board from there,
Mhm.
or multiple boards with different views on it.
I guess your weekly time will be replaced by me pushing people into Storyboard.
And to review whatever you write to make sure that
Yeah.
it makes sense. Yep.
Well, and that will force me to have somebody to report to on this to make sure that I actually keep working forward on it.
I will spell check whatever he writes.
Um, how does that sound for an action plan?
Good.
Okay.
So we would be doing Cinder, Brick, Cinder Client all in one go, right?
Yeah, I think when we go, take everything.
Yeah.
So that it's not for that project, you go to this bug tracker.
Yes. So I know we talked about this a long time ago, but do we redirect the old Launchpad bugs, or do they just live there forever? Or are people linking into the?
So the old Launchpad bugs stay there, and they will have the same number in Storyboard as they did in Launchpad.
Well, I mean, for people who who go to the URL of the old bugs after we move.
Yeah, I wonder if there's some way that we can mark that in Launchpad to let people know.
I think
this is
there's
just
I think there's a way
archived.
to put like a banner or something
Yeah.
on top to do that. We'll have to make sure we do that.
Yeah, because we also need to make sure no one goes to Launchpad and creates a new bug after we cut over.
Well,
Yeah,
I think
we'll have to change all the ACLs basically to make it where nobody can do that.
Will it migrate everybody, like notifications and stuff? If somebody's watching about
Probably not.
For bugs that are open, we probably need to just put a comment in them that says, go over here now.
No, but she's talking about if you are already subscribed to bug Notepad.
To a closed bug.
No, an open one.
Right. So put a comment that sends them an email
No,
that says,
like-
go.
after
Like I get an
90
email every time a Cinder bug is filed.
Yeah.
I don't believe there's any setting that's gonna bring that over to Storyboard, so Storyboard will email me and let me know when the Cinder bug is filed.
Really? It has some kind of notification thing.
I'm sure it has notification thing, but
Yeah.
it's not gonna be automatic where
The migration.
if you're just passively leaving it, it's just gonna keep working.
The user has to go set them up again in the system.
Yeah, that's why we send the comment to every open bug that says, if you care about this, go.
To this
Find
one place and add yourself.
Yeah. Unless we can somehow migrate the CC list of every bug, but I don't know if that's part of the
Not even
migration.
per bug, but just entire projects, watch the entire project.
Oh, the project watch list. Yeah. Well, if they don't notice that they have ceased to watch Cinder, then
Yeah.
maybe they weren't doing that much with it.
Probably gonna be a pain. You gotta do it.
Do they
Okay.
need an account to see a bug?
What?
Do they need an account in Storyboard to see the bug details?
I don't think so, but to edit, they do.
Yeah, you can view without logging in, but if you want to leave a comment or open a new one, I think you have to log in. And it just uses a Ubuntu One account.
Any other questions? Okay. All right, so I got an action plan. I feel good about it. Keep me honest to it. Okay, so we're running a little behind, but that's okay. Next topic we were going to discuss is revisiting idea of having a Cinder data service. And Walt proposed this. I don't think he's online. Where did Walt go?
No. Is there a document anywhere that kind of, since it's been a couple of years since we talked about this a whole lot, that kind of outlined what this thing would do? Or did we ever really even get that far into thinking about it?
I think all we have is discussions from previous PTGs.
Right. Because it's, I mean, the thing here sounds great that we have customers with large installations, but it would be nice if it kind of said, you know, and they are limited in scaling because of X, and this will fix this in this way. There's a lot of detail that's not here.
Yeah, somebody who's not familiar with it, I read that and I have no idea what it means.
Well, I think when we talked about this in the past, the kind of hand-wave philosophical background for it was to say that Cinder mixes control plane operations and data plane operations.
Right.
So that, you know, if you look back at like the history of like the late 90s and with packet processing and routers and stuff, one of the advances they made was to say, we're going to use separate, we're going to architecturally separate data plane and control plane operations. And then we can design data plane operations to be really fast and dumb or whatever, and the control plane operations to be sophisticated and useful or whatever. You know, that you can work in different planes and make it useful. So I used to be a real enthusiast for separating out these services, and kind of in a hand-wavy way, I still am. Then I went to work for a company that distributes the software and has people filing bugs. And one of my concerns is that you don't solve that problem just by separating out the new service. That is to say, it might make it possible, but there's still a lot of work to do to make the data. Once you've done that, you've got to do a lot of work to make it efficient. And the concern I have is in Manila, we have the services separated. Rodrigo actually did awesome work to split out a data plane service. The issue I have is that many of the operations are still slow for a lot of backends. So from a position of a company that supports customers, if I productionize and say, if we bless those data plane operations, unless the backends that we're working with actually work in an efficient way, we basically are just opening ourselves up to a whole lot of bugs. So I'm not against it. I'm just saying I think it really needs to be, you know, if you make a cloning service or something, or a data transfer migration service, and it's the time it takes is always proportional to the size of the data that you're doing.
So it's an interesting idea, but the tricky part about this, as far as designing what this is that the naive point of view would be that we've already done what you described, and Cinder volume is the data service. And the problem is we need to define what we're actually going to split where to figure out what we're actually proposing.
I don't think Cinder volume is a data service in this case. It's a control of the back end service, and the data plane service is separate.
But it does-
It does some.
But we need to spell out what the separation is, because
Yeah.
nobody's done that.
Yeah.
That's
I
the thing.
don't disagree with
Uh,
that.
You've got volume copy operations, you've got migrations, retype, image to volume to image work. Even backup stuff could be moved out to some data processing service.
Yeah,
So I think
those,
someone
those
needs
two
to
were the,
propose an architecture for what that looks like for us to start with.
the main motivations for that led us to doing that in Manila was that we were doing some intense operations on our Manila shared service, such as migration, and we were, by doing that in Manila shared service, the node was getting a lot of load, and this was impacting the request that just needed to go to the Manila shared service and go to the storage. They shouldn't be delayed because it's heavy load in the node. So that was one motivation. The other one was that since the Manila share node always had to be connected to the control plane, by having another service that could be placed somewhere else, we would be able to allow the architecture to be more flexible, so the system administrators could set up a node that would just talk to the storage over the data plane and would not need to have a lot of traffic in the control plane. So without this separation, we wouldn't be able to accomplish that. And for Cinder, I think the migration example is the best, because the last time I looked at the migration, Cinder migration code to migrate a volume, it does BD on the same node, and that causes a heavy load on the node.
And then we
Right,
also
but when
have
you
the-
get
But
it,
that's a task, right? It's a thread. Does it block the other operations?
No,
No,
I
it's all
think
threads.
the idea is not about blocking, like threading, blocking threads. It's about if you want to have, you cannot have a node that it's loaded with a lot of I/O operations with the same node that it's actually just doing control plane operations, because then you may get affected. Your control operation may get affected by you
Yeah, you
doing
may do a
20
DOS on your
migrations at the
control
same
plane.
time. If you can split them, you can be sure that your nodes doing the export, the initialize connection, the terminate connection will be fine, even if you're doing 20 migrations at the same time, because
You
they
can
are
scale services along different dimensions.
so there's
Exactly.
a big assumption in there too, though, which is that after we make this data service, that everyone that deploys it is actually going to put it on separate hardware. Because the initial thing that everyone's going to do is they're going to put the data service everywhere they have the volume service, and then you have the same
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah, but you have the possibility of not
They have
doing
that
the same
choice.
thing.
Yeah.
When someone
Yes.
complains,
Which is good if people actually do that.
It's kind of
I
like
think
with splitting up
people
the
do
backup
this.
service, you can still have the backup service with the volume service, but if they need it, they can put that
Yeah.
off somewhere else.
Yeah.
And it works pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was just gonna say, one of the other reasons that this has come up before breaking this apart is fiber channel. Right now, we have the issue, if you're using fiber channel, even if your sender volume node doesn't have any other storage requirements, you need to be on a node that has a fiber channel adapter.
So the theory
And
would
if
be
you-
that you only have to have the data service where the fiber channel is.
Yep.
And the sender volume can be other places.
Yeah, so it can send it there. So you can run like your sender volume service in a container and then offload this IO operation to a node that's actually set up to be able to do it.
Yeah,
That's
I
true,
think a
not
good
only for
criteria.
PTG-7, but for LVM too, because it's not obvious for operators why control plane nodes should have some iSCSI
Yeah,
demos. So
right. Oh, yeah.
I think a good criteria to split the tasks, to find out the tasks that need to be splitted, is that tasks that operations that need to attach any iSCSI or fiber channel volume to the Cinder volume service. It shouldn't be required to attach something to the Cinder volume service if its main responsibility is to direct commands to the storage controller, thus being in the control plane. So maybe all those could be offloaded.
Well,
And
that's
then
a
it
per
solves
driver
the fiber
question.
channel concern as well.
It's,
So
There's a lot, you can't just say like which operations, because create volume, sometimes you would need the data service and sometimes you wouldn't, because it would depend on the driver you're using.
Some
And that's-
drivers
so
are
there's-
actually attaching.
So there's a lot of
create volume from
infrastructure.
volume and creating volume from a snapshot.
Why
They are
image
actually
especially.
attaching.
But they attaching and doing some heavy I/O
DD.
operations.
That's exactly what create
Some
volume
drivers
from
do
image
that.
does.
Yep.
But
DD for
but sometimes
cloud.
it doesn't. It depends on the driver and your glance config and a whole bunch of stuff.
Yeah, maybe we
So
should.
if we're gonna split it to where create volume can be offloaded, we have to add enough logic so that it doesn't have to be, but it can be when it should be. And it's,
Well,
there's a lot of
I
we
think
could
it's
just
only the
reward
generic
these
part, the
drivers.
generic copies that the driver do. Anything that the manager do. Anything that the driver does by itself and it does any internal copy is out of our control.
Yeah.
Well, I
the
would think
manager is in the data plane for some drivers and not others as
But-
well.
we could always provide a
Create
way.
volume from image is
For-
done that way.
But how that comes back to the manager? I mean, the
That's-
manager does, for instance, a generic migration that's all on the manager. So that can be offloaded. But things that you send a request to the driver to create a volume, and then the driver does things in their volume, such as requesting an attach. I think that goes a bit out of bounds from what we can control. Because
Well, I think we have to define it in a way that it will work, just like when we do it in the Manji. Provide drivers a way to call that data service to do the operation. So they extract the code that they have there and it's in the data or something. But we have to figure out all those cases as well.
We can do the same approach as we do for generic migration. So if driver can do it all without heavy load, it's okay. If not, we can pass this work to the data service.
Right. And that's what I was getting at. It's very conditional. We can't just say we're going to move migrations.
Yes,
It's, you
just
know,
to, just to
So how different and like how far off from the solving use case part of this would we be if we actually get active cinder volume services and you just scatter those all over the cloud?
well, that's part of where I was going with my original question. I don't know.
Like it kind of seems like you solve the same scaling issues.
Not really.
Why not?
Because
Yeah.
the case Son was mentioning, if you have fiber channel, you can have your
You're on the cinder
control.
volume nodes on the fiber channel nodes. What's wrong with that?
Yeah, but you can move your control plane wherever you want. It doesn't have to be pinned to your control, to your nodes that have,
I guess, but I think so the fiber channel thing's one.
and also a big difference is that having active, we are not spreading the load based on what load each node is handling.
Sure.
So you may be sending the initialized connection to the node that it's already fully loaded with a lot of migrations, and the other ones are.
Does Vanilla do that? Do you guys load balance your data ones based on load?
So back on the scope of data service, we only have one operation, which is migrating a share, and all requests are sent to the data service. If there are multiple data services, then it's just based on some chance scheduling.
Fair now or something.
Yeah.
So it's the same. That works for your customers, right?
Yeah, but what I
We don't
meant
come
is
to
that
possibility during that time.
even with active, you could be impacting your control plane due to the data plane operations.
Yep.
That's what I meant, that you still have the same problem even with active.
Sure. If you could also run the data service on your controller and have the same problem. Because we could just
Yeah,
tell
it-
people don't run CVOL on controllers. Put it everywhere you put your Nova CPU.
Yeah, no, I didn't mean when I say the control plane, I meant of other OpenStack services. I meant of Cinder. Our control plane
Yeah.
may get impacted by our data plane because they are run on the same service. And sure, it will happen the same thing if they place the data service and the volume service on the same one. But if they come to you and they say, hey, my control plane is not working right, Cinder is not responding, and you say, okay, move the data plane away, the data service away, and everything works now,
Sure.
which is something we cannot do now. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I get the distinction. I asked because my suspicion is having a bunch of CVOLs will solve most complaints. But I agree,
Probably.
it's not technically correct, but.
It is good enough.
I think implementation wise though, it ends up basically being the same thing.
Yeah.
Because the interfaces, you're sending an AMQP request to CVOL or CData, waiting for,
But didn't this requirement of, not a requirement, but a recommendation of setting up the CVOL in a different node comes from the fact that it's actually doing heavy load operations? And now that we have the chance to improve, maybe it's a valid discussion of which services do we choose to scale out, right? So we could scale out the CVOL, or we could just restrict CVOL to simple operations and scale out the data service.
well, we want to scale out CVOL anyway. To
Yeah,
DHA.
we have to do active CVOL.
Yep.
And that's
How about
where
the active,
we recommend
active part for the data search wouldn't have a active for data service.
As I described for Manila, I think it doesn't may not make much sense depending on the type of operation, because you could just find out the request.
Just cancel the operation and start.
Yeah, the operation's just going to fail if it goes down.
but maybe we can postpone it until we actually have active and see if it's still a problem, which I think is,
Yeah, I would suggest the same.
like,
Well,
does it still?
no, that's reasonable. And I'm not anti this idea, but it just doesn't have a lot of definition about how it actually works and what it accomplishes.
Yeah, by the way, we don't need active for data service if we decide to go this way. Active bicep for data service should be enough because it just works, it does something.
Right.
I'm not following that.
Yeah, I don't.
I think you'd want it active, so you
Yeah.
don't have multiple of them doing stuff at the same time.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you can't scale it horizontally.
Yes, but active bicep will work too, so we can just send requests to any existing data service, not process this request. That's all.
Sure, yeah. For each data service node, you could have active passive. But I don't think it really matters. Like, you just have data service. Like, if we did it right, they would behave like, Nova compute nodes or something. They would they call attach, detach APIs and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It should be stateless.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good point.
It should be stateless, so active
I have a question, Jay.
Okay, go ahead, Rashad.
Where exactly does new service lie in the architecture?
Well, it's part of what we're trying to figure out.
It would be kind of a parallel to where CVOL gets deployed, I think.
Yeah, it would be parallel to where the CVOL service is deployed, but it could also be deployed on its own node somewhere. So it's really dependent on the end user's needs and environment.
But architecturally, I guess the idea is that sender volume service would send AMQP requests to the sender data service, and it would say, do this IO operation, and then the data service would send back an AMQP result of what happened. I assume that's what we're talking about.
Right.
So it would be interacting to all the services similar to the C volume.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, it would only be attached to CVOL, I think.
Yeah. It would only be attached to CVOL because that's the only one that does any data movement.
The scheduler and API don't have any reason to care about the data service as far as it's described so far.
Maybe API should know that you've got some data services to
I don't think it should.
show it on in the service list.
Oh,
Yeah, but it would still get reported back through the sender volume service if you were doing that, I think.
I'm sorry if this is a dumb question, but is the driver required to be present for the volume to be attached to the nodes? No, right? Okay.
Just like in Nova,
Okay.
we just pass the connection information that is required, and it gets done.
so it would just use OS brick.
on the,
The
on the
driver just
node.
creates the attachment information.
I think the only exception is like we were talking about before, where there's some drivers that inside of their methods, they do some local data copy. and
Yeah,
stuff.
actually, I mean, for those drivers,
Yeah.
Yeah.
they would need to be present.
No, for those drivers, we could just let them make the call to the data service with the connection information.
Okay.
They already have, they could somehow, in the same way that the manager would make the call, they would internally make the call. They are currently making the attach call inside and doing the DD and everything.
Okay.
Then they would just say, okay, I can remove this and I make the call myself. So they can use it.
Mhm.
That's what I think should be. Because otherwise, it makes no sense having a data service if some of the drivers don't use it and you still need.
Or if you would have to run the drivers there.
Yeah, that's a no-go.
So to actually move this ahead, since, this is probably the fifth or sixth, at least time we've talked about this, should we decide to start to re-architect just within Seagull to break apart some of these operations so that even though it's still within the same service, we're starting to figure out what needs to go where, and then once we've gotten that mostly working, then look at taking that piece of it and moving it out into a separate C data server?
It seems like the first place to start would be understanding the driver interfaces that it would be impacted or of interest here and map out.
That's why I think if we keep it in, we can do
Right.
small little pieces, and then that would help us figure out, oh, doing this is we need to do this other thing.
Is someone actually wanting to
Yeah, that's the next
work on
one.
this?
Yeah.
Someone want to work on this?
Well, Walt's the one who keeps bringing it up, but he's very peripherally involved right now. So,
I can maybe start to look, but it wouldn't be a high priority thing for me.
why do we feel like getting to the active volume service doesn't solve this?
Because it's different issues, sorry. It's different issue because active is more about control plane. This is more about data plane and data processing.
Well, active also will give you a way to distribute load.
There's a chance that it will get properly distributed with active, but there is also a chance you will not get it. That depending on the order of the requests you receive, all the data operation may be going to the same node.
And then you
You
end
end
up
up
with
but
this load.
Yeah, but
people having
with
scalability
active-
issues with this, they have so many operations ongoing that that's unlikely.
It's likely to
Yeah, but-
mitigate the problem.
Right.
The question is to what extent it will in
Well,
practice.
it still sounds plausible to me that it could mitigate it enough to not have to go through this.
Yeah, because with that active, if you have the problem, you can just scale more, and then the problem will be
Yeah.
mitigated.
But
Yeah,
from a practical standpoint, there are people here ready to work on active. It's likely to mitigate the problem.
Yep.
And there are people, less labor and people ready to work on maybe the more architecturally sound approach to this or not, depending on what you think, but.
Yeah, I
So
think
from a
that's
practical
what
standpoint, to
Patrick
see what
was
you can
trying
get out
to
of
do.
active first, right?
Yeah.
I don't mean that you wouldn't do what you're proposing to do, but.
Well,
Yeah, we
part
can
of the
still-
thing there too is, will we actually know if we succeeded with active? Because I haven't seen data showing what kind of loads people are hitting that cause problems. And I mean, we might make active, and then how are we gonna know if we solved it or not? Because I don't know that we actually.
How many drivers do support active? One or two?
Well, lots of them will support it before too long, I think.
On a side note, I'm not sure if it makes things simpler, but to add some context, some while ago in Manila, we started working on backup feature, and that backup feature would be implemented in the data service as well. That didn't get completed, but since you already have a backup service that is separate, and I assume that a backup service does a lot of I/O and heavy load operations, maybe you could already use what you have, the infrastructure that you have, the architecture of the backup service to accommodate this. Maybe offload some stuff to that and rename the backup service to the data service.
I don't think it would be that simple because I don't think it would be that simple, unfortunately. The backup service and the volume service work kind of differently and the way they scale and everything. And we would still need to figure out how to split the method. So the hard part is not creating a service. The hard part is figuring out how to split the data, how to make sure that the drivers also split the data operations and everything. And in the end, we go back to what Eric and what Patrick mentioned, that maybe just doing active-active to get probably solve the problem solved. And maybe that's a better way to start. But we probably won't even have a way of knowing if it's solved. Because we don't have hard data on, our users are doing 50 migrations at the same time, and that's when they hit a problem.
Forum topic.
Yep, indeed.
Find out how much of a problem it actually is.
Yeah, and when they are hitting the problem, yes?
I could see it still. I think I agree that we should probably get the active first and then see where things are. But I could still see wanting to break out the data services, maybe especially because we would have active where we could auto scale in Kubernetes the number of CBOL services, and then we would have to have something else that could actually compute that data operations if you're just running in a bunch of containers.
Yeah, like you wouldn't have to pin down the control, and containers maybe, but you would need the data ones if you have fiber channel to only cause that.
But that kind of comes back to Eric's point about fleshing out the proposal. You're starting to do that and no criticism intended, in a hand-wavy way.
It is.
And I think there's also a big win for containers because your controllers suddenly don't need to be privileged. You're just doing it. And that's
I think it's a worthwhile area of research, shall we say.
But HA is probably a higher priority that we spend time on to start.
I mean, at a minimum, we could get to a point where we say, here's one solution, and then we're working on a better solution. Once we have more data points as to how that works for people.
And to figure out if it gets better with active or not. Because even if it gets better and that problem gets resolved, we may still want to do it for other reasons, to make it easier to run it under Kubernetes or any other reason.
Not have to buy a fiber channel card for every CVOL instance.
Yeah, exactly.
Properly label your kublets.
In Ceph clusters, you could theoretically run the data service on the OSDs.
Sorry?
Couldn't you run the data service on the OSDs then?
OSDs?
On the same nodes that are dedicated to OSDs, storage nodes, what we call them.
Well, people don't run their CVOL process out on the OSDs, do they?
No, some of them.
Oh,
I don't
maybe.
know, I'm not sure.
I haven't tried that, but I suppose people are doing that. Anyway, all right. So the actions that come out of that is I'll put a forum topic together for this to get some real user feedback, hopefully. And Sean, you're going to look into the manager.
Start to
a little bit, but low priority. And
But back to what you just said, we don't, the clinch clincher for why we don't run CVOL on storage nodes today is because we run an active passive that runs on, right? Needs to be in the pacemaker cluster.
Yeah.
In case it's
So we
some-
could,
in case it's some vendor hardware with storage, we can transfer the volume storage down. We run in the volume control nodes.
Right.
So for NFS-based LVM CF, yeah, theoretically we can transfer the volume on storage. For LVM we must, but hardware storage cannot do it.
Right. Right. All right. We got 17 minutes until lunch. Is that enough to talk about what you guys found out about privsep?
Yep, probably in 5 minutes.
Yay!
It's all amazing.
Privsep is amazing.
No, and basically,
Well, it's
Tommy Lee.
Tommy made it amazing.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's in the other Etherpad. It's basically, he wrote a patch and basically it works. We just need to make a few changes so it looks better from a aesthetical point of view, not.
In the Oslo meeting, we basically did like a group code review of it. Looked pretty good.
And that means that we will be able to do parallel operations on privsep, which improves cinder performance because we have slow privsep calls like in iSCSI logins and stuff like that can take a long time. And right now they are serialized. So with Tommy's patch, they will be parallelized, which is great.
And the good thing about this too is that we can actually finally go do the whole thing that privsep was for in Cinder, which was to split up some of our privileged code into more constrained, privileged domains instead of just having to run things as root. So I had started prototyping some code to do that a long time ago for the LVM driver, and I stopped because we were worried about this. But now that we're getting the big blocking issue fixed that prevented us from not really wanting to do too much with privsep, we can actually go make use of it now.
Okay. Thanks for fixing that, Tommy. Cool. Well, that's good. So we'll be watching for privsep patches from you then?
Sure.
Okay. Or anybody else who wants to get their privsep on?
Yeah.
All right. Cool. Is there anything else we want to cover, or do we want to break for lunch a few minutes early? Okay. I hear a cough for lunch.
It's a simple question you would ask, that if you ended it with, or do you want to break for lunch early?
Okay. Good. Thank you. Good discussion this morning. And look forward to seeing you all back here at 1:30.